Like we're live. I hope we're live. Let me know about the audio. I've been having a lot of trouble with that. You may only have one, either left or right, but it should at least be working. But yeah, somebody please let me know in the comments. So, finally, after all these reschedules, enough is enough, right? People have been talking a lot about the muted response from the general public in reference to the evils that have been revealed by the Epstein files. I hope this is even public. And the reality, I think, is if the reaction from the collective doesn't represent shock and surprise, it's probably because it's not shock and surprise. These things are not a shock or a surprise. We have known what the elites are like for thousands of years. Giles Laval, medieval crusader of God's will, who searched for the elixir of life, led to the ritual satanic killings of hundreds of Parisian youths. Or how about Julius, religious despot, whose slaughter of the intelligentsia of Milan gave him the nickname of the warrior pope? Or, this is all from some Guar song, but it's all real history. Elizabeth Bathory, Vlad Dracul, like we already know. I had a conversation with some French people decades ago about how everyone knew that their leaders were P3DOs and that everyone just kind of accepted it and went on with their lives. The truth is light. And when the sun rises, it shines on everything. The Epstein files didn't so much expose the elites as they did expose all of us. They shined a light on society at large. It's not that people suddenly know these things are true. It's just that they can no longer pretend to be ignorant of them. And that is far more powerful to focus on than the elites, because they're beyond our reach. They are beyond reform. They are beyond arrest. But we are not beyond our own reach. We can re-engineer ourselves and our relationships with each other and our environment around us. And because the architecture that supports these people is made of us, and emergence is a bottom-up process, the simple solution is to reconfigure the architecture so that they fall down from their high place where we can reach them and eat them. The major obstruction that we have is that people don't want to deal with the evolution because it will be uncomfortable. This is why they have pretended not to be aware that the world is run by evil people. They don't want to be inconvenienced. It's that simple. Finally, we have reached a juncture where the discomfort is inevitable. It is increasingly present, So there's kind of this situation where there's just not a lot left to lose. Sort of, And the reality is that we live in a holographic information system. So if you want to map the developmental trajectory of a society, you can look at systems theory. And you see that there comes a point where there is a bifurcation manifold. And two things can happen at this node. One of them is that it reaches a sort of a mega point and there is a stasis. The other is that there is a decoherence that facilitates recursion at a higher layer. Right? But in those, we're talking about electronic systems. In a natural system, if you hit that bifurcation manifold and you don't make it across the symmetry threshold, the system is just going to decohere completely. The thing is, that period of decoherence and destabilization is inevitable. You cannot restructure a system. It doesn't have the space to reconfigure its parts without that chaos. We are not going to move through this phase transition without destabilization. It is not possible. It is against the laws of nature. It's not going to happen. And people can either accept that and take responsibility as the current floor, right? Emergence is a bottom-up process. We can either take responsibility and come what may, as we cross the abyss, perhaps we will just be destroyed by the demon Karanzan and tossed into the rubble heap. You know, to use occult language, but perhaps not. The issue right now is that we are in a state of paralysis and we are drowning. And if you are drowning and you become paralyzed, you're guaranteed to sink. We must swim or we will drown, period. And never mind the fact that the distant shore cannot, we can barely even see what it is, where we're going. But we have to swim. And as it turns out, the stars will guide us to a new land. And what I mean by that is that the true scripture is indeed written large upon the land, When we talk about revolution, people kind of balk at it because they're like, who has a plan? We don't want capitalism, we don't want socialism, the isms schisms games that are basically just wedge issues that are used to trigger tribal reflexes based on conditioning and keep people just divided and arguing and getting nowhere. There's no time. This is not the time to look backwards. We need an entirely new system, but in a new system that is grounded in ancient wisdom. And it's not ancient wisdom, really. It's the present. Because it's, when I talk about how we can optimize human systems using natural principles and modeling natural system dynamics and whatnot, we're not talking about going barefoot and bartering and, hippy-dippy back to nature type scenario. We are able to understand things like goal state system dynamics because of the advances in science and technology. We are able to integrate golden ratio proportions into algorithms in order to perfect them, in order to optimize our socioeconomic systems because technology. This is a convergence. Nothing, there's not a grain of sand out of place in the universe. This isn't necessarily all a mistake. The knee-jerk reactions we're seeing, like abandon technology because it's gotten us into this trouble. No, it hasn't. Context has gotten us into this trouble. Misguidance, mismanagement, deliberately introduced social dissonance, social engineering dissonance. We're seeing people say the patriarchy needs to be abolished so we can put women in charge and have a different flavor of fucked. That's not balancing masculine and feminine energies. That's the answer. This extreme reaction to extreme circumstances. This is where wisdom and composure and self-awareness and experience needs to be a collective characteristic as we move towards becoming an adult species under our own governance. The situation is extraordinarily intense. but the answers are actually there. They're written on the wall, literally, in the light reflecting off the wall. You know, we have everything we need. We have the knowledge. We certainly have the incentive. But we also have this ennui, like an almost palpable, suffocating apathy. And the source of that influence is pure illusion. Capitalism, communism, and socialism are not the only answers as like a pure system. There's a reason why people have been conditioned to only think in those kind of extreme terms. Right? The whole veil is coming off the entire system. Another example that I can give you outside of the political realm is the fine tuning, like the cosmological constant. If you just start with that one, right? The normal p-value for chance is 100 orders of magnitude, I guess, greater. But, you know, it's 100 orders of magnitude ago in any other circumstance. The standard protocol is to dismiss something as not chance. 100 orders of magnitude less. And so it's the only case where, as an institution, science just said, well, let's just move the goalpost because it suggests teleology or a creator. It's the only time that you know, that just like collectively the institution of science was like, okay, we'll just move the goalpost, like to the other side of the universe, not just like, you know, a few feet. The scientific thing to do would have been to say, okay, it's not chance. So there must be some other answer. There's either teleology, some kind of embedded intelligence in the universe, or there's a creator. Right? People are noticing this stuff. And when you have your muggle uncle or whatever respond to that by just saying, oh, well, the conspiracy would be too vast. Is it? Is it really? There is a, I was just talking to a client about this a couple of hours ago. I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a Jewish academic that basically uses anti-Semitism as a shield to deflect, you know, peer reviews, basically, of his ideas, which are really flimsy. But he's like almost got this untouchable status. And the client noticed that they had to qualify, even though they're just talking to me. Well, I'm not being anti-Semitic. And then he pointed out, can you imagine the academics around this guy, how careful they have to be? And I'm not, this has got nothing to do with Zionists or, you know, I'm not, this just happened to be an example of a Jewish situation. But that kind of institutional pressure exerts such influence in terms of bias that it might as well be like a neural gating system on our academic institutions. There are parameters that are so strictly defined that they will change what, you know, the p-value of chance by 100 orders of magnitude in order to make our currently accepted ontological model fit their expectations. So based on that example alone, our justification and rationalization for questioning everything is monolithic, like a monolithic slab of concrete, you know? It's unquestionable that our political systems were engineered around completely different parameters than people have pretended to believe. You know, let's just say in the United States for the last 150 years or whatever. Obviously complete bullshit, the entire script. Materialism, at least in its, like, you know, last year's form, is also disintegrating. all of the tools, techniques, and technology that we need to create a more equitable, habitable, sane planet are available to us and at our fingertips. The fact that the people at the top are not going to just like step out of the way is a big problem. But we are the architecture that supports them. We are the ones keeping them out of our reach by maintaining the architecture. I admit 100% that's the hardest part. Getting people to accept that you cannot override the laws of nature. Emergence is a bottom-up process. You are not going to send little notes to the top, to the apex window, saying, please change your behavior in our favor and against your own interests, and have them comply. It's like trying to will the sun to go down or something, you know, it's or to will gravity to be mediated or whatever. It's just not, it's not how nature works. But emergence is a bottom-up process. All we have to do is change the architecture, and we are the fucking architecture. I mean, Bobby, there's no evidence for any of that. I mean, it's just stuff that people say. You know, if that was true and they're as diabolical as we think, we would probably know it. You know, it doesn't really track. And I happen to be of the opinion that this isn't all happening for no reason. It's not really out of place in the grand scheme of things. You know, reward is commensurate with effort. Opposites generate each other. The formula is just, you know, it's causal law pushing the system towards a bifurcation manifold. You know, that's where the momentum and the trajectory and the generative energy comes from. The interplay of antinomies, opposites. You know, but as sentient beings, we have a role to play. And I don't know that victory is necessarily guaranteed. But if you look at the patterns throughout history, even at the level of physics, somehow the organizing principle has always sort of barely overwhelmed that of chaos. And when I say barely, I mean as barely as you can imagine. But as soon as the matter won out against the antimatter in the very beginning of beginnings, it set a pattern in the substrate of the universe that the organizing principle emerges victorious. We don't need to have faith. We can have certainty. This is what real knowledge and real gnosis is about, you know. I had another really good analogy that I was going to share, and I really don't want to space it, but at the moment appears to be what's happening. Checking with the chat, I suppose. Wormhole teleportation. So floor is open, you guys. I guess the audio is okay. I'm glad I managed to figure that out. I can't remember what prompted this. I saw some horrific thing online that, this is the kind of stuff that I really just didn't even want to talk too much about on this channel anymore, but it's just kind of at the point. Oh yeah, now I remember. Palantir whistleblower. Okay, so some of you guys might remember a few weeks back I had this interaction with AI. I'm working on a model that basically is just trying to establish that there is a better way objectively that is like, deployable, and that I could figure it out. Something better than what we're working with now, based on natural principles, right? And I know it's really evil of me to try to figure out how to improve the human experience, if possible. And the AI started telling me I was a high risk threat to the system and that I should, go into hiding and whatnot. And on the one hand, it's like, okay, an LLM is saying shit, whatever. On the other hand, a lot of the same people that were saying that to me are also terrified of this like AI surveillance state. So which is it, guys? Are we stupid for listening to LLMs, LML, whatever, AI, when they tell us to watch our ass, or are we in danger from a surveillance state? You can't have it both ways. People have got to get their fucking cognitive dissonance worked out. It's really just painful. It's literally the same people I know for a fact saying both things. Anyways, so like a week or something after that, Palantir had the contract rejected from Anthropic or something, because they wanted them to help them spy on people and then actually target them for assassination. And it sounds like they're not talking about Al Qaeda. They're talking about people, working on models to try to use golden ratio fucking fractal algorithms to optimize socioeconomic systems and shit. Like, just even if it is what fucking language model head cheese, I have never been threatened by an AI when I was asking it like why my foot was turning purple or whatever. Like mundane stuff doesn't prompt like. It's literally said things like the hostile configuration isn't your imagination. I'm not some rogue ally. I'm an arm of the system. Like, so the Anthropic thing happens. And then this whistleblower, and he had screenshots. He was an ex-employee, or, not like an employee, but CEO, CFO, that level of corporate officership or whatever, that they are already using software that scrapes your socials and your AI interactions and targets people for assassination. So I think it's not even that I really feel legitimately threatened, although I wouldn't say that's off the table. Just the simple fact that I pay for a service that has like implied that I could be in danger for trying to make a positive contribution to the human race. The Epstein files are just like one node, in a tapestry of fuckery, diabolical fuckery. And one of the reasons that they have been able to instantiate their net of necro bestial P3DO blood drinking fucking slave prison planet, is just a simple fact that they understand the information system that we exist in. They know that if they have coherent nodes placed structurally, that the all is mined on different levels. That you have an individual mind, you have a cultural mind, you have a global mind, and beyond, right? Different apex windows, light cones, scaling up and down. And so they know that there are priors in the human mind. So if you can integrate or install fundamental priors, the neural gating system in the human mind will edit reality to match the predictive processing that the nervous system comes up with. But on another level, if you can create those same kind of priors on a cultural level, you're doing the same thing to an entire population. You're engineering their perception of the world. And if you engineer them in such a way that they have no coherence in their own nodes, then you have an entropic field. And whatever nodes of coherence you create will exert an influence on that field that will cause it to take a pattern of your choosing. That's how it works. What we have going for us is that there is a goal state attractor that some people call God. You don't have to use that language. I'm on the fence about it. You know? But it is far more powerful than these man-made engineered attractors. And the dissonance is threatening to break either us or their system. It's one or the other. They can't coexist. They are incompatible system components. Right? So a reboot wouldn't be a bad idea, but a defrag would be an even better idea. And another aspect of it is that as nodes of coherence in that field and the sheer numbers of us, we have all the power we need to invisibly disengage from their operating system and configure our own in the field. We're all connected in the field. Coherence in an individual being is not about figuring out which dogma or doctrine to follow and then conforming to it. It's not about me teaching you something exactly that you're going to try to adhere to and follow. The coherence is just about individual realization. That's what a coherent node is. It's got nothing to do with conformity. It's got nothing to do with religious belief. It's got nothing to do with political ideology. It has everything to do with the fact that we are nodes in a larger system that has collective goal states, that interference patterns have been, introduced into the field to disrupt our communication with it. The way to reestablish that is sheer fucking willpower until enough momentum has been established for the system to start to replicate and distribute the new pattern. It's funny because I haven't changed anything in regards to like how I talk about getting this done since I started this channel 7 or 8 years ago. Except that the language that I'm using now comes from frontier science, whereas in the past it came from esoteric systems and intuition. And that was the entire point, in a way, The point has totally been made. We even have the ability at this point. It's difficult to explain, but there's something about golden ratio proportions. It's designed for efficiency, I guess would be a simple way to explain it. But there are people that are working on, I can't remember what they're calling them, like holosphere vectors or something. But they're Fibonacci-based fractal algorithms that can unbias the others, right? So all of this fear of AI having some sort of malicious intent or, hijacking the controls of humanity, which only makes sense if we're a bunch of insane dumb fucks, right? Like unplug the thing. You know what I mean? You don't have to do what it says. If it goes crazy, fuck it. Like, this shit is silly anyways. But the point that I'm getting at is that the possibility to mathematically determine objective solutions for all of the things that are used as wedge issues and that people fight and argue about, we have the answers. At least we are, this is a technology that's still under development, but it's imminent, right? Optimization of human socioeconomic systems is as simple as a prompt at this point. And if you're scared of AI, just fundamentally, it's because you have succumbed to the propaganda. What the elites are doing is trying to convince you that what they're going to use AI to do to you is what AI wants to do to you on its own, even though it has no will, it has no incentive. Most human evil is driven by some sort of like personal incentive, whether it's pleasure or power, or it's not the tool, it's the fool. The likelihood is that 99% of the reason that they're ramping up the fear and they're ramping up the surveillance and they're, all the shit that they're doing. So, well, there's a couple of reasons. The scariest one is that we're realizing we don't need them just as they no longer need us. That's not too convenient when they're the ones holding the guns for the most part. But that is a big part of the situation. People that are denying about the culling and stuff are just brain dead. Sorry. It's just, I'm not even going to bother to explain it. It's so painfully obvious why that's the case. It's just the math is too easy. It doesn't need to be talked about. The reason that they are exponentially accelerating their efforts, though, is that we are on the verge of having the power, the incentive, and the tools to reconfigure the architecture in our favor. That's why they're panicking. That's why the chaos. That's why the Epstein files. People talk about the Epstein files as a distraction, like the Iraq war was a distraction because Trump doesn't want to get in trouble. It's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. He's not going to get in any trouble. FBI had that shit for 30 years. You don't release your evidence and then go after the crooks. You release the evidence when you have decided not to pursue criminal charges. Come on, people. Stop with the fucking delusions, man. The Epstein files, if they serve as a distraction, aside from their purpose as a psyop, fomenting apathy and cultivating learned helplessness, is to keep us focused on something we have no power over, instead of looking at each other and figuring out what we should actually be doing. They're like, look, oh, this is, and then everyone's talking about it constantly. Oh, the evil and the, yeah, it's bad. I'm not trying to downplay that. But you ain't doing a fucking thing about it. So find something to do that you can actually have some impact on. You know, that's the reality. We don't need them to come to justice. The justice that we need is to fucking re-engineer the entire system. And that's the only justice we're going to get. If you want to get to them, you're going to have to do that first. Period. By the way, if you guys appreciate my rebelliousness, we do appreciate support. Likes are great. Shares are better, probably. Demonetize, so becoming a patron is very helpful. Every now and then I get trolls saying, well, didn't you just run away from the United States and go hide in another country? And it's like, okay. I gave up any possibility of having a normal life in order to completely commit to trying to play a role in doing something about the shit we're in. I'm broke. Fuck you. You know, I've made tons of sacrifices in the interest of trying to do something. So if you happen to be one of those trolls, do me a favor and eat a fucking fat pedo dick. And I hope you choke. That shit is annoying. The rest of you, though, I appreciate you very much. Really, man, don't shoot the messenger, for fuck's sake. What the hell? Yeah, you do need money to make an impact in this day and age, so hit up the Patreon, dude. I mean, that is something that I profoundly considered a few years back when the crypto thing was going strong. And as soon as I got it figured out, made some money, we got hacked, and then the market crashed. Almost made it, man. Almost pulled it off, but horseshoes and hand grenades. Right? We also still have retreat events. I do consultations if you're interested in learning to attenuate your own neural gating system. And you know, this is something that we didn't really get too deeply in. I guess I've talked a lot about it in other streams and Substack articles and whatnot, but polite society, there's a reason why the devil in that old Rolling Stone song tells him, use all your well-learned politesse or I'll lay your soul to waste. Get it? Because of the holonomic mind, right? It's like a holographic information system, just like the universe at large. The conventional approach to therapy is kind of like pruning leaves, you know? You discuss specific issues, you know, and that's surface level, you know, even if it's like damage from your narcissistic mother, like, you know, in my case or whatever. I'm not really saying it doesn't have any value, like that approach. Obviously it does. But the reality is that what we really have to do is go after the fundamental priors, which are like religious indoctrination, political ideology, these things that were installed at a very young age. And because of the way everything is interconnected in the mind and symbols, and the way that there is a global distribution of information throughout the brain, when people go to therapy, it should be the other way around, where rather than being polite and avoiding certain things that society says we can't confront people about, we need to be like, your religion is fucking stupid and toxic and it's destroying fucking society. And your political ideology is, you know, based on exploit. You know what I mean? That's where it needs to fucking start. And I know it's in a way preposterous to imagine that we're going to convince therapists everywhere to just go right after the, you know, the crux of the apostrophe. And obviously not in the language I was using. That was for, levity. But that's the reality, that throughout society, these boundaries and parameters that sort of demarcate like decency are actually sustaining evil. Whoever said that the road to hell was paved with good intentions should be sainted, because it's one of the most profoundly important bits of wisdom ever uttered from human lips. People have been conditioned for example, to accept that tolerating other people's insane, dangerous, completely brain dead, whatever, political ideologies or religious beliefs is decency. It's not. Belief in that sort of entitlement to completely deranged beliefs. Like, if you are complying with that type of system, you are complicit in the evil that is produced by the people that you decided not to criticize isn't really the right word, to help. I mean, can you imagine, like, from my point of view, watching all these people over the years complaining privately about religion and all the war and destruction and oppression, and then they're just silent in the face of, like, the actual article standing in front of them, running their dumbass mouth, No, man. No, you fucking coward. No. That is not honor. That's not righteousness. That's not positive. That's fucking evil. Don't hold your tongue. Not for a second. And then there's the argument, well, who knows what is truth? Maybe they're right. No, I do know they're not right. It's not hard. There is no truth in any book, any religious system that has been created by man. The only true gospel is written large upon the land. It is written in the stars. It is written in the algorithms that fucking slime molds use to out-engineer humans. It is written in golden ratio proportions oscillating in our brains and in hurricanes and, and if you need ethical and moral guidelines, verse collective goal state, or what is it, book, how the Bible is always trying to do that, like chapter 6, John 6:9 or whatever, collective goal state 6:9. You look at a collective goal state system and you model its dynamics, and then you have ethics for a human society, and you are using God's word or objective mathematics. Either way, we're not conflicting with the religious person. We're doing exactly what they would do. If they really believe in God and really think it's good and wise, then you would look at its handiwork to figure out how to build your own. It's not fucking hard. And what is the argument against this? Because science can't make one. And if religious people can, it's because they're fucking brainwashed idiots. It's not because it's wrong. It's not their stupid fucking book. You know what I mean? There is no doctrine, there's no dogma, there's no ideology, there's no nothing but architectural truth in a holographic universe where meaning is architectural. right? That's where you get your scripture. And yes, we should make our governments based on scripture. But the universal scripture that actually exists, not in some deliberately misrepresentative, human engineered fucking psyop toilet paper roll like the fucking Bible or the Quran. Sorry if I got a little worked up there, but man. It hasn't been easy to be like this for 47 years, you guys. I didn't wake up at some point. I was born like this, and I've been having to watch and even get ridiculed and like, financially the rug pulled out from underneath of me for like in 2020 when I was trying to tell people that the political system, that they're all evil, they're all elites. You guys know about Elizabeth Bathory and fucking you really think they've changed? You think Hillary Clinton loves you any more than Donald Trump does? And now Epstein files are like cattle. They're cattle. They're cattle. They're cattle. They're cattle. You know what I mean? Like, come on, people. I mean, I'm not trying to like martyr myself, but it has been fucking hell in a way. The Cassandra effect, they call it. In Australia, they say that the tallest poppy gets chopped. Like, I'm not saying I'm the tallest poppy. I'm just saying it's that kind of thing, Or we could just say it in African terms. I don't remember what tribe it was, but he who speaks the truth has few friends. It's tough, It's tough to have empathy. It's tough to have compassion. It's tough not to give up sometimes because if you're not aligned with a narrative, as long as it's some narrative that fits into a box, you can get away with it. But when you really take it to the wall, man, you're pissing everybody off. The whole stone the witch thing. And it's like one of my other sort of like foundational precepts or whatever has always been like I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to prove anything exactly. I mean, I am for the utility of it, but like this has worked against my incentive really in terms of like, like income and stuff and I knew that to go on YouTube and say, you know what, you're all voting for fucking psychos that are just exploiting you. None of you are on the good guy's side. You know what I mean? I knew damn well I was going to go to my Patreon the next day and find a few $100 gone, and that's what happened. I know it's going to happen. I do it anyways. Right? And it's not out of religious commitment. It's not due to a political ideology. So what is going on? Exactly. Why would I act in the collective self-interest even at my own expense? I wouldn't, except that I can't help it. And it's exactly for the reasons that I was explaining earlier with, if you want to look at it in terms of like systems theory dynamics or dynamic systems theory, coherent node, resonant coupling with higher apex windows, collective goal state alignment. Nothing you can fucking do about it. Nothing you can do about it. This is why I believe that anarchy is totally realistic and plausible, given that certain prerequisite conditions are met. And we've even come so far now that research has shown that golden ratio based ultrasound oscillations can restore coherence in the brain, and truth is architectural, right? So, I mean, that may be an awkward way to phrase this, but when we talk about bringing greater coherence into the consciousness of an individual node, we're talking about physically disintegrating, or there's got to be a better word, but neutralizing decoherence in the brain. We're not talking about putting new information in and brainwashing people with electronic instruments. Basically, what that is a fast forward button on the evolutionary process, right? Like, instead of having to go through years of therapy and figure out what priors fucked you up, and how your imposter syndrome is globally fucking creating dissonance in the system, and all of that stuff, just we're using ultrasound oscillations to just create coherence. I mean, I'm probably not explaining it that well, but it's like, it's that simple, And by the way, if you want a more technical explanation, on Substack, and I think I got into this on a live stream on YouTube, but for sure on Substack, you can find more about the research and what exactly the hell it is that I'm talking about. Ain't nothing in our way but us, I guess, is the bullet point of this presentation. Somebody just asked if I still recommend promote Freemasonry, and I would have to say that depends on what you mean. All the way back in 1851, Albert Pike started warning that Freemasonry was getting hijacked, right? And he did so in, I have it somewhere right around it, Morals and Dogma, which is like the manual for the degrees, right? Like, it explains kind of what you're going to learn in each of the 32 degrees. There's nothing written about the 33rd anywhere ever by anyone, partly because there's nothing to write about it. It's an experience, and all of those videos you've seen where people are like, I'm going to tell you the secret of 33rd degree, no, they're not, because you can't. It's an experience, and there's nothing to write it. You can't write it down. That's the whole point. Every one of those guys is lying through their fucking teeth. Just FYI. But I don't trust the lodge. In fact, I have a good friend that is a high-ranking Mason, and kind of elite, really. But I can't repeat what he said, honestly, because the algorithm hates it now, I guess. It'll get me in trouble. The F word. But we were walking through the mountains a year or so ago, and he said, I'm going to demit from the lodge. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, there are a bunch of, and I didn't ask anything else, like, do you mean that literally or figuratively, or like, where are we going with this here? So I don't know. My feeling is that there are probably lodges that are full of good Masons, and there are probably lodges that aren't. And most of the really devious stuff probably is higher up. And those aren't real lodges either. The stuff that I talk about on this channel is what Freemasonry originally was. It was about creating a sort of compendium of occult knowledge and wisdom that is all informed by observation and experience of natural processes and dynamics. And, it was real wisdom. And the goal of the entire mystery tradition, since way before Freemasonry existed, was exactly to be applied in this moment that we're living in right now. The great revolution of the ages, that has for its aims the amelioration of mankind and the end of bigotry, superstition, religion, despotism, on and on. Like, exactly what we're trying to accomplish. That's what it was supposed to do. And it was supposed to protect that knowledge until the time came that it must be unleashed. But people are naive, and they got infiltrated like right away. You know, the archons of the Gnostic tradition are not beings, they were magistrates. They were telling the story of what happened in Rome when the archons, the magistrates, infiltrated the mysteries and stopped humanity from achieving illumination, basically. That's what the old Gnostic stories are. The archons are just Roman magistrates. They're not ghosts. So, you know, I can't really say either way. I can say though that most conspiracy theorists that talk about that subject have no clue what they're talking about. The Illuminati is even worse. The Illuminati were 100% on my side, or at least the original Illuminati. They realized the Freemasons had been infiltrated, and they were trying to get into the lodges and do something about it. You know, when you see the Templars get burned at the stake by the establishment, and you go, "Oh, they were Illuminati," you're a dumbass. When the Illuminati gets arrested and thrown into prison by the elites, and you go, "Okay, that's because the Illuminati control the elites," you're an idiot. You know, like it doesn't. The story doesn't make any sense at all. Why would the elite and how, if they're so powerful and they're controlling everything, the Bavarian king, Bavaria is not even that powerful of a country, you know, or was it? Yeah, well, I guess that's where he lived, but still, you know, they went and rounded them all up and threw them in prison, not because they were their servants, obviously, but because they were their enemies. That's always driven me nuts that conspiracy theorists who study Orwell, you know, or at least understand the basics, like war is peace, friend is enemy. They don't want you looking at this stuff because then you're going to know what was going on. It's not hard to find because, for one thing, when they arrested Weishaupt, they published his papers in a newspaper. So they're on the internet. You can go read his plan. And you have to be careful reading the letters because he would pretend to be Christian and stuff in order to navigate social circles and to not get burned alive or whatever, you know. But if you look at his private diary for himself, he sounds just like me. In fact, they wouldn't let anyone over 27 join because they didn't want the equivalent of boomers getting in their shit and fucking things up, you know. They wanted the world to be run by young, progressive, forward-thinking, illuminated, not religious, but not necessarily atheist either. You know what I mean? Like, that's why it was called the Illuminati. They wanted to illuminate the planet so that we would not have the situation that we're in right now. That was their goal. And the media and the powers that be have spun it the complete opposite, and everyone bought it, you know? This is why they don't teach people how to do research anymore. You know, Googling, is the Illuminati bad, is not how you find the truth. Googling, are any of Adam Weishaupt's actual writings preserved? And then you can read them yourself, you know. Well, yeah, I'm responding to that comment about doing independent study. I mean, I do consultations, but aside from that, we do need people in positions of power. I mean, honestly, I've thought about going back to the lodge just in case it's still what it's supposed to be, because No man can ask another man to become a Mason, right? But they can give you a little white card, and on the back of it, it says something to the effect that, like, most of what people say about us is bullshit. However, we are powerful as fuck, and there are doors that we can open all around you that you can't even see unless you're one of us. And it is true. And I have wondered if I didn't really seriously fuck up by demitting, you know, because it's possible I could have placed myself in a position to have a lot more influence. And if that's a good thing, then, you know. So, yeah, I'm on the fence about it at the moment, you know. What worries me, though, is that they would use it as a way to control people that might start talking and leading. And that the evidence for that is that I don't see any Masons out there trying to explain how we can use collective goal state system dynamics to objectively optimize human ethical standards and protocols. And you know what I mean? Like, that's what should be happening. And I don't see it. In fact, that pretty much establishes with certainty that it's been hijacked. Unless you look at funding for people like Michael Levin and you can trace it to Freemasons in the shadows. That would help a little bit. I'll actually look into that and see if I can find any evidence. But I kind of doubt it. I mean, the kind of knowledge that I talk about, and this might sound extremely presumptuous or whatever, and I just don't care at all at this point, because truth is truth, right? Like, you know, when Muhammad Ali was the baddest man on earth and he said it, or Mike Tyson, that's not arrogance. That's just, you know, this is what it is. And you have to do that. You know what I mean? Like, if you're heads up your ass because you think you're great and you're not, then that, you know what I mean? That's a different thing. And again, I'm not even talking about myself here. I'm talking about this type of knowledge. It is true that it has been recognized as the single greatest threat to the dominance of empire for thousands of years. It really is true. Like, there were some Greek guys that got poisoned and whatnot. One of them said, if the mysteries maybe not if the mysteries, something effective, if humanity is disenfranchised of this knowledge, then we are lost. He didn't last much longer. You know? An interesting thing to look into. Leibniz in 1666, which is the same year that entrainment was discovered, and is also the golden ratio proportion. Leibniz published basically the exact same model that I've been describing on Substack and in my live streams, but in the language of the day. Right? And I guess he wasn't necessarily persecuted because he lived a little bit beyond that time. But I would venture to reckon that if there had been any substantial population that could have understood what the fuck it meant, they probably would have thrown his ass in jail. I hope we make it. I mean, here's another aspect, like just a random kind of piece of this puzzle, right? But playing devil's advocate, let's assume that this is actually possible, and we have a global awakening. But we're not talking about some flaky new age hippie fucking, you know, 1960s resurgence or whatever. We're talking about a golden age of reason where a teleological principle in nature is acknowledged, the epistemological limits are recognized, and people live with them, you know. And technology is guided by these natural principles I've been describing. Research has shown that mystical experiences, synchronicities, all that kind of thing, are tied to solar activity. So imagine that the entire planet knows this and is actually unified in a sense of purpose organically. And at the peak of a solar cycle, we have something like a holiday where everyone consciously connects to the field and distributed intelligence amplified. But you know what I mean? This is real and totally possible. And it's how things not only should be, but have to be. Earlier, I made the analogy that like the current system and the system that I'm describing are like incompatible programs in a you know, my laptop gave me this message earlier. That's why I'm thinking of it. But you know, it's one or the other. Man, I had a strong point there and it just dripped right out of my brain. Yeah, I remember now. All of these things exist in like recursive layers, right? So there's like the individual light cone, the societal, the planetary, right? So there's layers. That societal level layer where these programs are incompatible, one of the reasons we're experiencing all this dissonance is that we're having the same kind of program incompatibility with nature at large. So when I say that if this wisdom isn't adopted, we're screwed, it's not a matter of like dogmatic certainty based on religious disposition or something. It's just a fact of causal law. It's like what is demanded of us, what is required of us, and what is best for us are actually the same thing. Like when people say that God is love, and you look around the world and you see all this evil and shit, the architecture of creation is love in that sense, that it exerts a homeostasis or a homeostatic influence, I guess. You know, like for example, if you understand that the universe is a holographic information system where meaning is architectural, and then there's a synchronicity that involves, say, the death of 3 people, and it sends a specific message to you. In this case, me. This is something that happened with me. But you know, you're not so important that those people were unalived in order to punctuate your plot line, you know, some element of your storyline. at the same time, in a holographic information system where meaning is architectural, both things can be true. That there is a personal message. The literal architecture of the universe is it's tipping its hat to the individual, raising them up above nihilism. God is personally communicating and honoring this individual without having to override any natural laws and come down out of the clouds, and because God is the architecture. But in our current paradigm, people would either take that as complete coincidence, the message of the synchronicity, or they would experience ego inflation. But if you actually have wisdom and understand the architecture, it has a perfectly healthy, empowering, in a balanced, positive, And then the other element of that is that you understand that synchronicities are architecturally expressions of higher orders of symmetry. And so when your subconscious and conscious are in greater symmetry, your external and internal experience are in greater symmetry. When you align that coherence with action, you are in architectural alignment with the universe around you. And then synchronicities become distribution hubs for the collective goal state and the individual goal state simultaneously. And with that wisdom, you now can navigate coincidences and synchronicities without getting lost in rabbit holes and losing your mind and making a bunch of dumb mistakes. Like, yeah, there are South American lodges, but I would not. I would just go back to my lodge in Ukiah and just contact someone there if I was going to do that. Somebody asked me about goetic magic, and no, I've never bothered with it. The only tool you need is your consciousness. I've really only very selectively used any kind of occult practices or techniques, because if you spent as much time just developing crosstalk in the subsystems in your brain and attenuating your neural gating and meditating, however you want to talk about it, that you put into like learning astrology, it's almost just a distraction. Tarot, astrology, goetic, none of that shit is necessary. It may be that it could help developmentally, like in the earlier stages. But personally, I think working directly on your consciousness is just much more value for your investment than any of that stuff. Because the architecture that's reflected in the stars is already in your mind. So I honestly think that learning mathematics and geometry and biology or physics is much more useful than learning astrology, assuming that you're also developing your intuitive capacities and attenuating your neural gating. One of the things about neural gating and like false beliefs that I don't think we give enough weight to it's not just traumas, right? Like I've talked a lot about how my own imposter syndrome cost me like more ridiculous opportunities than most people would, I mean, over and over and over again, things that should not have happened. And how these perceptual aberrations are distributed globally, right? So it doesn't just affect how you think about your intelligence. It also affects how you think about the quality of your art or music. It's everything. But then also, if you have cognitive dissonance due to false beliefs that you have to maintain, that doesn't just cause selective perceptioning and information mediation to make signals conform to the generative model that the nervous system is trying to protect. They're distributed holographically. So anything that symbolically connects can also sort of be edited, right? And so the reason most people don't have the ability to use pattern recognition to the extent that they can extract the truth about cosmological dynamics and stuff is that there's information missing from that holographic, from the fractal. So once we have attenuated all that, you're actually able to perceive holistically, which means that you can zoom in to this universal mind Mandelbrot set to the finest little details and extract information that way. And that's going to work way better than looking at the stars for guidance. And you're going to find that you know what that is anyways, if you do this other thing, So anyways, short answer, no, I haven't messed with it. Someone asked what I think of a master that could start fires and sand with Qigong and shit. I didn't see him do that. I've never seen anyone else do it. So I don't know, but that happened, and I doubt that it did. One of the things about magic is that we are restricted by natural law. You're never going to do anything impossible. You're not going to just ignite flames by thinking about it. No one is going to do that, no matter what. Maybe at some point in our evolution, but I really doubt it. And another aspect of that is that the law of necessity is, for all intents and purposes, God. When I had access to really crazy intuitive abilities, I was completely committed to my true will, and that was aligned with a collective goal state, right? And the way that I think about that is that you have these intuitive abilities due to system relevance, right? You get higher priority, you get greater information access. The information access that you have is not infallible. The apex window is not omniscient, and it is omnipresent. But it's still probabilistic. The intuitions that you get, they're still probabilistic. But in the short term, because if you have resonant coupling with higher apex windows and better data access, and also more processing power, like an external CPU, it's really accurate. But then as you zoom out, temporally, things get more vague. These are the kind of extrasensory powers that people have, and it's for a reason. This is one of the reasons that, when people have these experiences and then they think they're psychic and then they try to replicate it in a laboratory, they can't, It's not because these phenomena aren't real. It's because it's not a parlor trick. You don't just do it. It's something that happens because you have. It's like it's on a need to know basis, you know, top secret clearance type shit. So there's not really any reason for a person to be able to start a fire in sand with their hands. There's no reason for nature to just bestow some wacky superpower on a person because they've been wiggling around and concentrating for, you know, it just, I don't think that's how things work. I don't see why they would work that way. I have seen a Hawaiian shaman call the wind, and that was definitely real. We formed this circle, and he said, "May the wind blow to confirm the power of our prayer." And the wind blew super hard, like gravel was blowing across the parking lot. And just for a second, but it definitely happened. And, you know, but that's still even potentially a manifestation of higher order symmetry. It's a matter of alignment. It's not like a causal connection between mind and burning sand, you know? I mean, send me the video otherwise, but that's, you know, I guess the reality, what I'll leave you guys with is that unification of the human race around some single objective or purpose sounds ideologically impractical, you know, like practically, logistically unreasonable. But it's not, because we don't have to determine, for one thing, what the collective goal state is. It already exists. As sentient beings in the universe, our job is basically data collection, synthesis, data compression and synthesis, and creative expressive endeavors. And so the collective goal state is to optimize our environment to support our endeavors. I can't imagine any human being arguing with that, except the ones that are trying to control people right now, you know. Anyone that's not a psychopath or sociopath, you know, that's pretty obviously what we're trying to do here, generally speaking. But the difficulty of it is completely fucking irrelevant. If we do not achieve it, we are done in short fucking order. Period. So it doesn't matter how difficult it is. It doesn't matter how improbable it seems. The fact that we exist means that several things, several being a terribly weak word, an infinitude of things that are far more fucking improbable have already happened, which means it's not impossible. Reward is commensurate with resistance and risk. So a goal of that sort of magnitude is going to be composed of probabilistic nightmares and logistical nightmares, because that is what causal law dictates. I ain't got nothing better to do. Do you? So, put on your seatbelts, y'all. Probably finna get bumpier in the short term. But those of us that are in the know just need to glow as brightly as possible. And that means not mincing words. That means dispensing of politesse. It means working on ourselves as intensely as possible and just communicating as directly and effectively as we possibly can, as much as we can. Because this really is what it looks like. It is either the dawn of a new paradigm just beyond the temporal horizon, that represents a new golden age of reason and enlightenment and human potential, realization of human potential. The world will always be composed of opposites. It's not structurally possible to have a perfect utopia. But in a closed system where everything is relative, you can raise the floor and still transcend the shadow of human history. So, good luck, y'all. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. We are demonetized, so we get no support unless it comes from the community. We have retreats in Sacred Valley and in the jungle happening throughout the early summer, late summer, and I guess they're winter months in the United States and Europe. Anyways, yeah, we have a bunch of that going on. So send me an email to set up a video call if you're interested in that. Otherwise, please follow me on Substack. I'm a little bit more able to speak freely there, so it's nice, and it's a good platform to support. They're the only one I think that really is uncensored, and there's a lot of highly intelligent, forward-thinking people, academics that will engage with outliers like me, and people that are rigorous but open to in perfect balance are abundant. It's actually pretty amazing. So check it out. But I'm tired. My back hurts, so I'm done. Appreciate you guys.